The whistle of the Union Pacific cut through the evening air like a knife through silk. Catherine Morse stood on the platform at Salado Station, her small valise clutched in trembling hands, her rounded belly beneath her worn blue traveling dress, announcing her condition to anyone who cared to look. And in the summer of 1882, in a Colorado mining town built on judgment and hard labor, everyone cared to look. The train hissed and groaned as it came to rest, steam billowing across the wooden platform like morning fog rolling down from the mountains. Catherine stepped forward, her free hand instinctively moving to protect the life growing inside her. 20 years old, alone, and 8 months pregnant, she had nowhere left to run. This was the end of the line in more ways than one. The crowd began to gather before her feet even touched the platform. Miners in dusty clothes, their faces weathered by sun and labor. Town matrons in proper dresses, their faces pinched with something that looked like righteousness but tasted like cruelty. Children pulled at their mothers' skirts, pointing at the pregnant woman who dared show herself in public. Harlan Wade was the first to speak. A rough-looking man with a tobacco-stained beard and hands that had never known gentleness, he spat a stream of brown juice near her feet. The crowd parted slightly, giving him room to approach. "We don't need your kind here, girl." His voice, carried across the platform loud enough for everyone to hear, meant to humiliate rather than inform. "Take yourself back on that train and find some other town to shame." Mrs. Gideon Pritchard stepped forward, next her traveling suit impeccable, her face a mask of moral superiority. She was the kind of woman who had never made a mistake in her life, or at least never been caught making one, and she wore that fact like a badge of honor. "Decent women stay hidden in your condition," she announced, her voice dripping with condemnation. "The very sight of you is an offense to proper society." Catherine felt the crowd closing in. Not physically, not yet, but the walls were forming just the same. Invisible barriers made of whispers and judgment of shame dressed up as righteousness. She had endured this in St. Louis. She had hoped, foolishly perhaps, that the West might be different. That distance might equal freedom. She had been wrong. A hand grabbed her arm, rough fingers digging into the fabric of her sleeve. Catherine pulled back her other hand, moving protectively over her belly. The baby kicked as if sensing her fear, as if trying to tell her to be strong. But strength was in short supply when you were alone and afraid and surrounded by strangers who had already decided you were worthless. Let her go. The voice came from somewhere behind the crowd, deep controlled, carrying the kind of authority that made men stop and reconsider their actions. The words were simple, but underneath them ran a current of steel and barely contained fury. The crowd parted like the Red Sea before Moses and Samuel Thorne stepped into view. He was tall, perhaps 6 feet or more, with shoulders broadened by years of physical labor. His face was weathered in the way that comes from living outdoors, from facing sun and wind and rain without complaint. Blue-gray eyes, the color of storm clouds over distant mountains, fixed on Catherine with an intensity that made her breath catch. His hand rested on the Colt revolver at his hip, not threatening, but present. A reminder that some lines should not be crossed. "Ain't your business, Thorne," Harlan Wade muttered, but his voice had lost some of its earlier bravado. Men who knew Samuel Thorne knew better than to push him too far. "I'm making it my business." Sam's voice remained level, but there was something underneath it that promised consequences. "Anyone disagrees can settle it with me. Right here, right now." The crowd hesitated. Catherine felt the shift in the air, the way power moved from the mob to the man with the quiet voice and the steady gaze. She had seen men fight before, had witnessed violence born of anger and alcohol. But this was different. This was control. This was a man who knew exactly how dangerous he was and chose moment by moment whether to unleash it. Sam extended his hand toward Catherine. His fingers were calloused, scarred from work and war, but his gesture held nothing but gentleness. "Come on, ma'am. These folks have forgotten their manners, but that doesn't mean you have to suffer for it." Catherine stared at his outstretched hand. Every instinct screamed caution. Men didn't help without expecting payment. Men didn't offer kindness without strings attached. Thomas had taught her that lesson well. But standing there, surrounded by hostility with no other options presenting themselves, Catherine made a choice. She placed her hand in his. His grip was warm, solid, anchoring her to something real in a world that had become unmoored. He helped her step down from the platform, his other hand steadying her elbow as she navigated the uneven boards. The crowd watched in silence, judgment replaced by uncertainty. As they walked away from the station, Catherine heard the whispers starting up again behind them. But they felt distant now, muted by the presence of the man walking beside her. She glanced up at his profile, trying to read something in his expression, but all she saw was a kind of weariness that went bone deep, and something else she couldn't quite name, something that looked almost like pain. Years later, when she told this story to her children, Catherine would say that in that moment she had to choose between the devil she knew, judgment and cruelty, and the devil she didn't, a stranger with haunted eyes and a loaded gun. She chose the unknown. She chose Samuel Thorne, and in doing so she chose a future neither of them could have imagined. But first, she had to understand how she came to be standing on that platform in the first place, how a girl from a comfortable St. Louis home ended up alone and pregnant in a Colorado mining town, trusting her life to a man whose name she didn't even know yet. 3 months earlier, Catherine's world had been entirely different, the Morse household in St. Louis had been a place of order and respectability. Her father, Richard Morse, owned one of the most successful dry goods stores in the city. Not wealthy by the standards of the railroad barons, but comfortable enough to employ servants, to send his daughter to a proper school, to dream of advantageous marriages and grandchildren born with legitimate names. Catherine's mother, Margaret, had been a gentlewoman, quiet where her husband was, loud, soft where he was hard. She had married into the Morse family from somewhere out west, though she rarely spoke of her life before marriage. Catherine had loved her mother's stories, the ones she would tell late at night about mountains and wide open spaces, about a different kind of life than the constrained existence they lived in the city. And there had been Thomas Bradford, clerk in her father's store. Handsome in a refined way, educated, charming. He had courted Catherine with poetry and promises, with talk of building a life together of children and happiness, and all the things young women were taught to dream about. When Catherine discovered she was pregnant, she had been terrified but also cautiously hopeful. Surely Thomas would do the right thing. Surely the man who had whispered words of love in the darkness would stand by her in the light. She had been devastatingly wrong. Thomas's face, when she told him, would haunt her forever. The way his expression shifted from shock to calculation to cold dismissal in the space of a single breath. The words that followed cut deeper than any knife. "You can't prove it's mine," could be anyone's baby. Catherine had stared at him, unable to process what she was hearing. "Thomas, we were going to marry. You said you loved me." "I said a lot of things." His voice had gone flat, empty of the warmth she thought she knew. "But I'm not about to ruin my life for a mistake. Find some other fool to play father to your bastard." He had left that very night, disappeared without notice, without explanation, leaving behind only the wreckage of Catherine's trust and the growing evidence of their time together. When Catherine told her parents, she had hoped, perhaps naively, that they would stand by her. That family would mean something more than reputation. Her mother had wept, her father had raged, and in the end, blood proved thinner than social standing. "You have 1 hour to pack your things and leave this house." Her father's words were cold, final, allowing no argument. "I will not have a whore living under my roof." "Richard, please." Her mother had tried to intercede, her voice breaking with grief. "She's our daughter, our child." She made her choice. She chose to spread her legs for that clerk and bring shame on this family. She is no daughter of mine. Catherine had packed in a daze, moving through her room like a ghost, gathering what little she could fit in a single valise. Her mother had slipped her money when her father wasn't looking. Not much, but enough for a train ticket. Enough to run. "Go west," her mother had whispered, pressing an old silver locket into Catherine's hands. "Find the Hartley family in Colorado. My sister Eleanor. She might help." Those were the last words Catherine heard from her mother. Margaret Morse died 2 months later, her heart broken by losing her daughter. Catherine learned of her death through a brief telegram from a family lawyer. Just the growing life inside her and a fading hope that somewhere out there someone might show her kindness. Now, 3 months later, walking beside a stranger through the streets of Salado, Catherine wondered if that kindness had finally arrived, or if she had simply traded one kind of danger for another. Sam led her to a small cafe on the main street. The sign above the door read Irene's Place in simple letters. Inside, the smell of fresh bread and coffee filled the air, warm and welcoming after the hostility of the train station. A woman looked up from behind the counter. She was perhaps 40, with kind eyes and flour-dusted hands. When she saw Sam, her face broke into a smile that held genuine affection. "Sam Thorne bringing a lady to dinner," she said, her voice carrying a note of teasing warmth. "I thought I'd live to see a lot of things, but this wasn't on my list." Sam's answering smile was tight, not quite reaching his eyes. "Evening, Irene. We could use some coffee and whatever you're serving for dinner." Irene's gaze shifted to Catherine, taking in her condition without judgment, simply noting it as fact. "Sit yourselves down. I'll bring out the food." They settled into a table near the window. Catherine placed her hands on the worn wood, trying to steady herself. The day had been long, the confrontation at the station, draining what little strength she had left. But questions burned in her mind, demanding answers. "Why did you help me?" Her voice came out quieter than she intended, but Sam heard it clearly enough. He was silent for a long moment, staring out the window at the mountains beyond the town. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of things left unsaid. "Let's just say I know what it's like when no one helps. That's not an answer. It's the only one I can give right now." Catherine studied his face, trying to read what lay beneath the careful mask. She saw scars there, not just the physical kind that marked his skin, but deeper ones, the kind that came from carrying burdens too heavy for too long alone. Irene brought coffee, steam rising from thick ceramic mugs. She set them down with a gentleness that suggested she understood more than she was saying. As she turned to leave, she paused, leaning close to Sam. "Eleanor knows you're back in town. She sent a message." The change in Sam was immediate. His jaw tightened, his hands curling into fists on the table. "Tell her I have nothing to say." After Irene walked away, Catherine ventured another question. "Who's Eleanor?" "Someone from before." The words came out clipped, final. "Doesn't matter now." But it did matter. Catherine could see that it mattered more than almost anything else. Whoever Eleanor was, she had power over Sam, the kind of power that came from shared history, from wounds that hadn't quite healed. They ate in silence. The food was simple but good. Beef stew, fresh bread, butter that tasted like summer grass. Catherine hadn't realized how hungry she was until the first bite. She ate slowly, savoring each mouthful, aware of Sam watching her with an expression she couldn't quite decipher. When she had finished, Sam leaned back in his chair. "I have a cabin on my property. It's empty, has been for years. You could stay there while you look for work." Suspicion flared instantly. Men don't offer charity without expecting payment. Pain flickered across Sam's face, quick but unmistakable. "I'm not asking for payment. I'm repaying a debt." "To who?" "To someone I failed. Someone I can't ever repay. But maybe I can do better this time." The honesty in his voice surprised her. Most men lied smoothly, painting themselves in flattering colors. But Sam spoke his failure like a confession, like something he had lived with so long it had become part of his skin. Catherine wanted to ask more, to understand the mystery of this man who had stepped into her life at exactly the moment she needed someone. But exhaustion was catching up with her, and the baby was kicking with enough force to remind her that rest was not optional. "There's a hotel in town," Sam continued. "The Mountain View. Woman who runs it is named Eleanor Peterson. She's fair, might have work if you're interested." Eleanor. The name again. Catherine filed it away, another piece of a puzzle she didn't yet understand. The Mountain View Hotel stood 3 stories tall at the end of Main Street. It was well maintained, the wood freshly painted, the windows gleaming in the fading light. Sam led her inside, and Catherine found herself in a lobby that spoke of modest prosperity. Clean floors, comfortable furniture, the smell of lemon oil and fresh linens. Behind the reception desk stood a woman who could only be Eleanor Peterson. She was perhaps 52, with silver threaded through auburn hair that might once have been the same dark red as Catherine's own. Her eyes were green sharp, missing nothing. She wore a simple black dress, well-made but not ostentatious, and carried herself with the kind of authority that came from years of making hard decisions. When those green eyes landed on Catherine, something flickered in their depths. Recognition, surprise. The expression came and went too quickly to identify. "Mrs. Peterson," Sam said, his voice carefully neutral. "This is Catherine Morse. She's looking for work." Eleanor's gaze moved between them, calculating, assessing. Then she focused entirely on Catherine. "Where are you from, Miss Morse?" "St. Louis, ma'am." "And your mother's name before marriage?" The question seemed odd, too personal for a job interview, but Catherine answered honestly. "Margaret Hartley, ma'am. Why do you ask?" For just a moment, Eleanor's face went pale. Her hand gripped the edge of the desk, knuckles whitening with pressure. Then the mask snapped back into place, smooth and unreadable. No reason. Just curious about new arrivals. She pulled out a ledger, opening it to a blank page. "Can you read, write, keep accounts?" "Yes, ma'am. I was trained as a teacher." "Can you make beds, serve meals, tolerate difficult guests without dissolving into tears?" "I don't cry easily, ma'am." Catherine's voice was steady. "Not anymore." Eleanor's penetrating look seemed to see straight through her, cataloging every secret, every wound, every fear. "No, I don't suppose you do." The job offer was straightforward. $2 a week, room and board, 6 days of work with Sundays free. After the child came, they would renegotiate terms. Catherine's shock must have shown on her face. "You'll let me keep working. I don't believe in punishing children for their parents' mistakes," Eleanor said, her voice softer now. "Or mothers for loving their babies." There was something underneath those words, a story of history wounds of Eleanor's own. But before Catherine could ask, Eleanor glanced at Sam with an expression that held layers of meaning Catherine couldn't begin to parse. After Eleanor showed Catherine to her room, a small but clean space on the 3rd floor, she returned downstairs to find Sam waiting in the lobby. "I know why you brought her here." Eleanor's voice was cold, controlled fury wrapped in silk. "Do you? You think saving her will balance the scales. It won't." Sam met her gaze steadily. "I'm not trying to balance anything. I'm trying to do what's right. You didn't know right 6 years ago. Why should I trust you now? You shouldn't, but trust her. She deserves better than what I gave." He stopped himself, the unfinished sentence hanging in the air between them. Eleanor's eyes narrowed. "If you fail her the way you failed Mary, I will destroy you, not quickly, not mercifully. I will make you live with it every single day for the rest of your miserable life." Sam nodded once, accepting the threat as his due. "I wouldn't expect anything less." The next morning, Sam took Catherine to see the cabin. His ranch lay 3 miles outside town, nestled in a valley cupped by mountains on 3 sides. The main house was modest but solid, built to withstand harsh winters and harder memories. Corrals held 15 horses of various colors and temperaments, and an aging mixed-breed dog came bounding up to greet them, tail wagging with uncomplicated joy. "That's Buck," Sam said, his voice warming slightly as he scratched the dog's ears. "He's mostly harmless." The foreman's cabin stood separate from the main house near a grove of pine trees. It was small but well built, with a stone fireplace, a sturdy table, 2 chairs, and a narrow bed against one wall. A smaller room off to the side held a washstand and space for a copper tub. Sam lit a fire in the fireplace, the wood catching quickly, filling the space with warmth and the scent of burning pine. He brought in firewood, stacking it neatly near the stove. He brought linens, worn but clean, and helped Catherine make up the bed. As he worked, Catherine watched him. His movements were efficient, economical, the actions of a man who had lived alone for a long time. But there was something else, too. A kind of careful distance, as if he was afraid to get too close, as if proximity might break something fragile inside him. "Why is this cabin empty?" she asked, running her hand along the smooth wood of the table. Sam paused, his back to her. "Built it 6 years ago. Thought I'd need help running the place. Never happened." It was a lie. Not a complete one, perhaps, but Catherine heard the omission in his voice. This cabin had been built for someone, for a specific purpose that had never come to pass. The baby kicked, then hard enough to make Catherine gasp and press her hand to her belly. Sam turned at the sound, concern immediate on his face. "Are you all right?" "Yes, just active." She smiled slightly, rubbing the spot where tiny feet or hands pushed against her skin. "The baby likes to remind me they're there." Sam moved toward her without thinking, his hand reaching out. Then he caught himself, uncertainty crossing his face. "May I?" Catherine guided his hand to where the baby was moving. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a strong kick directly against his palm. Sam's expression transformed, wonder, joy, and then sudden devastating pain. He pulled his hand back as if burned, stepping away quickly. "I should go. Main house is just up the path if you need anything." He was out the door before Catherine could respond, moving fast, almost fleeing. She stood alone in the cabin, her hand still on her belly, trying to understand what had just happened. The first week at the hotel passed in a blur of new faces and tasks. Catherine learned quickly, adapting to the rhythm of the work, making beds with hospital corners, serving meals with a smile even when her back ached and her feet swelled, keeping the account books with the careful precision her teacher training had instilled. Eleanor watched her constantly, not unkindly, but with an intensity that suggested she was looking for something specific, some sign, some proof of worthiness that Catherine didn't understand. The other staff were cautiously friendly. Martha Colby, the cook, was a quiet woman of 50 who showed kindness through food, making sure Catherine ate enough that she rested when she could. Betsy Fletcher, only 17 and shy as a rabbit, seemed to orbit Catherine with a kind of desperate hope, as if seeing Catherine manage might prove that survival was possible. And there was Joseph Miller, though everyone called him Doc. A veteran like Sam, carrying his own scars from Gettysburg and other battles that had names but no meaning to those who hadn't been there. He worked as the hotel's handyman, but Catherine often saw him and Sam talking in low voices, the kind of conversation that came from shared experience too dark to speak of in daylight. Sam came to the hotel every evening. He brought small gifts, wildflowers from his property, their colors bright against her worn dresses. A book of poetry, Wordsworth, the pages soft from previous reading. He would sit with her on the back porch watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and crimson, and they would talk. Catherine told him about St. Louis, about Thomas's betrayal and her father's rejection. Sam listened without judgment, his presence steady as stone. But when she asked about his life, his past, he deflected. Shared pieces, but never the whole picture. On the 6th day, Catherine overheard a conversation she wasn't meant to hear. Doc and Sam standing near the hotel's back entrance, their voices low but carrying in the evening air. "You sure about this, Sam?" Doc's voice held concern, the kind that came from caring. "Eleanor's not one to forgive." "I'm not asking for forgiveness, just a chance to do better. Some debts can't be repaid." Catherine filed the words away, another fragment of the mystery that was Samuel Thorne. That evening, when Sam brought her a slim volume of poetry and they settled onto the porch, Catherine decided to push. "Why are you so kind to me?" Sam was quiet for a long moment, his eyes on the distant peaks. "Maybe I'm trying to be the person someone needed me to be once." "Who?" The single word seemed to cost him something. "Someone I loved, someone I failed." "What happened?" "She died, because I wasn't strong enough to protect her." The raw honesty in his voice made Catherine's throat tight. "I'm sorry." "So am I." He met her eyes then, and Catherine saw the weight he carried. Not just grief, but guilt, the kind that burrowed deep and made a home in your bones. "Every day, I'm sorry." They sat in silence as the sun sank below the mountains and the first stars appeared. Catherine wanted to reach for his hand to offer comfort, but something held her back. The sense that Sam's wounds were too fresh, too deep to be touched by someone like her. The storm came without warning on the 7th day. Catherine was at the hotel, working through the account books in Eleanor's office, when the sky outside the window turned the color of bruises. Thunder rolled down from the mountains and lightning split the air with electric fury. Doc Miller appeared in the doorway, his face grim. "Sam's hurt, horse spooked in the lightning. He's refusing to see a doctor." Eleanor looked up sharply. "How bad?" "Bad enough. Cracked ribs at least, maybe worse. Stubborn fool is trying to feed his horses one-handed." Without thinking, Catherine stood. "I should go." Eleanor's green eyes fixed on her, calculating. Then, surprising them both, she nodded. "Take the rest of the day. See to him." The ride to Sam's ranch was treacherous. the road slick with rain, the sky flashing with lightning that made the horses nervous. But Doc handled the wagon with the skill of a man who had driven through worse than storms, through artillery fire, and chaos that made weather seem gentle by comparison. They found Sam in his house, seated in an armchair, with his left arm held tight against his body in a makeshift sling. His face was pale, drawn with pain, and when Catherine touched his forehead, she felt the heat of fever burning underneath his skin. "I'm fine," he said, though the words came out strained. "You shouldn't have come all this way." Catherine gave him a look that would have done Eleanor Peterson proud. "Don't be foolish. Where's your laudanum?" Over his protest, she set to work. She helped him out of his shirt, trying not to notice the scars that marked his body. A bullet wound near his shoulder, puckered and old. Other marks from battle, from violence, from a life lived hard. But there was something else, too. Faded rope burns on his wrists, the kind that came from restraints. The kind that told stories Catherine didn't know how to ask about. The fever worsened as the night wore on. Infection had set in where the fence post had broken his skin, and Catherine found herself keeping vigil beside his bed, cooling his burning skin with wet cloths, trying to bring the temperature down before it consumed him. In his delirium, Sam spoke. Fragments of sentences, names, confessions that tumbled out without control. "Mary, I'm sorry. The baby. I should have stayed. I should have been there. Eleanor, please, let me explain. I didn't mean to fail her. Blood. So much blood. Make it stop." Catherine held his hand through the worst of it, her own exhaustion forgotten. "Who's Mary?" "Sam," she whispered into the darkness. "Who's Mary?" By morning, the fever had broken. Sam woke slowly, disoriented, his eyes unfocused until they found Catherine asleep in the chair beside his bed, her hand still holding his. He watched her for a long moment, something like wonder and terror warring on his face. Then she stirred, waking her gray-green eyes, meeting his. "You're awake. Thank God." "You stayed." The words came out rough, his voice damaged by fever and screaming he didn't remember. "Of course I stayed." There was a pause, heavy with things unsaid. Then Catherine spoke the words that had been burning in her mind all night. "You said her name, Mary, and Eleanor, and something about a baby." Sam closed his eyes, gathering himself. When he opened them again, they held resignation. "I was married 6 years ago. Her name was Mary Winters. We were going to have a child. She died. In childbirth. Both of them died. I'm so sorry." His voice turned sharp, cutting. "It was my fault. When she needed me to be strong, I was weak. When she needed me present, I was drunk in a saloon." Catherine saw the truth then. Not the whole truth, not yet, but enough. Whatever had happened 6 years ago, Sam blamed himself, carried that blame like a stone around his neck, dragging him down, drowning him in guilt that wouldn't wash away. "Whatever happened, Sam, you're trying to make amends now. That counts for something. Does it? Or am I just using you to ease my conscience?" The question hung between them, honest and terrible. Catherine met his eyes steadily. "I don't know. Are you—" Sam held her gaze. "No, this you, it's more than that." The admission cost him something. Catherine could see it in the way his jaw tightened, the way his hand gripped the bedsheet. But he didn't look away. When Catherine returned to the hotel that evening, Eleanor was waiting in her private quarters. "Sit down, Catherine." It wasn't a request. Catherine sat, exhaustion making her limbs heavy. Eleanor poured tea, her movements precise, controlled. Then she spoke words that would change everything. "I know Sam told you about his wife." Catherine's head snapped up. "How did you know?" "Because I'm the one who told him to bring you here." "I don't understand." Eleanor set down her teacup with careful precision. 6 years ago, a young woman came to this town, pregnant, alone, desperate. A young man promised to take care of her, promised to marry her. But when things got difficult, he suggested she give the baby away. Said it would be easier. She refused. They fought. He left her alone. She went into labor early, alone in a cabin. She and the baby both died. Catherine felt ice forming in her chest. "You're saying Sam abandoned his wife. I'm saying he failed when it mattered most. And now here you are, pregnant, alone, trusting him." Eleanor's eyes bored into hers. "I need to know, can he do better this time, or will you die like she did?" The words landed like blows. Catherine sat frozen, trying to reconcile the man who had held her hand through labor pains, not her own, with the man Eleanor described. "Why are you telling me this?" Because you deserve to know the truth before you give him your heart. Catherine stood her legs unsteady. And if I choose to trust him anyway, then you're braver or more foolish than I ever was. Catherine left her mind spinning, but instead of going to her room, she found herself walking back towards Sam's ranch. The road was muddy from yesterday's storm, but her feet knew the way. She found him on the porch, mostly recovered, staring out at the mountains. He looked up when he heard her approach, and something in her face must have told him what was coming. Eleanor told me about Mary. Sam's whole body tensed. What did she tell you? That you failed her? That she died because you weren't there? That's true. Is it the whole truth? The pause stretched long enough to hurt. No, but it's all I can give you right now. Catherine moved closer, close enough to see the fear in his eyes. I'm not Mary. I know. I'm not asking you to save me. I know. But if you want to be in my life, I need to know this. Will you run when things get hard? Sam's voice came out raw, stripped of everything but honesty. I don't know. 6 years ago, I ran. Not physically, but in every way that mattered. I don't know if I'm strong enough now. Catherine reached up her hand, touching his face with infinite gentleness. Then we'll find out together. Sam's hand came up to cover hers, his eyes searching her face as if memorizing every detail. Then he leaned down, and his lips found hers. The kiss was not triumphant. It was not victorious or certain. It was desperate and longing and terrified, both of them pouring their brokenness into it, hoping that together their fragments might make something whole. When they pulled apart, both were breathing hard, Catherine's hand still on Sam's face, his hand still covering hers. But the peace lasted only until morning. Catherine woke to sharp pain lancing through her abdomen, not the gentle kicks of the baby, but something harder, more insistent. She gasped, her hands going to her belly, and felt witness between her legs. No, not yet. Too early. 6 weeks too early. A knock at the cabin door. Doc Miller, his face grave. Ryder came for you. Telegram forwarded from St. Louis. Catherine took the paper with shaking hands. The words swam before her eyes. Arriving Salado July 3rd. Prepared to claim my rights as father. Thomas Bradford. Terror flooded through her. Thomas. Coming here. After denying the baby, after destroying her life, why would he come now? Another pain sharper this time. Catherine doubled over, crying out. Doc was moving before she could speak. I'll get Sam. We need to get you to town. But before he could leave, another figure appeared in the doorway. Eleanor stood there, her face pale, her green eyes fixed on Sam with an intensity that burned. She knows about Mary, partially. Her voice was cold, controlled. Eleanor, not now. Sam started. When? Eleanor's voice cut like a blade. When she's dying like my daughter died, when it's too late. Catherine looked between them, seeing something pass in their eyes. A shared history. A wound that had never healed. 3 weeks from now will mark 6 years. Eleanor continued, her voice shaking. 6 years since you failed someone who needed you, someone who trusted you with everything. Sam's face went white as bone. Don't you dare fail this one, too. Eleanor's eyes held terrible knowledge. Secrets Catherine didn't yet understand. Because if you do, there won't be a hole deep enough for you to hide in. Catherine wanted to ask what they meant, who Eleanor was talking about. But another contraction hit sharper than before, stealing her breath and her questions. The world tilted. She felt Sam's arms catching her, heard Eleanor's voice, urgent now, calling for Dr. Harris. And then everything went dark. Catherine woke to whiteness. White ceiling, white walls, white sheets pulled up to her chin. For a moment she couldn't remember where she was or how she had gotten there. Then the pain came flooding back, dull now, but present, a reminder of what her body had endured. Easy now. Eleanor Peterson's voice came from beside the bed, firm but not unkind. Don't try to sit up yet. Catherine turned her head slowly. Eleanor sat in a chair pulled close to the bedside, her silver-streaked hair pulled back severely, her green eyes watching with the intensity of a hawk tracking prey. The baby? Catherine's voice came out as a whisper, rough from screaming she didn't remember. Fine? You both are fine. Eleanor's hand moved to Catherine's forehead, checking for fever with the practiced touch of someone who had nursed the sick before. False labor. Braxton Hicks, contractions brought on by stress. Doctor, Harris examined you. Says you need complete bed rest for 3 weeks, or you risk going into real labor too early. Relief flooded through Catherine so powerfully she felt tears burning at the corners of her eyes. The baby was safe, still growing, still protected inside her, where nothing could hurt it yet. "Where's Sam?" Eleanor's expression hardened almost imperceptibly. "Downstairs. Been pacing the lobby since Doc brought you in yesterday. Won't leave, won't eat, just wears a hole in my floor and drives my guests to distraction." Yesterday. Catherine had lost a full day to the darkness. "What you said about Mary being your daughter. Every word was true." Eleanor's voice held no apology, no softening. "Mary Winters Peterson was my only child. She met Samuel Thorne when she was 21 and thought she could save him from his demons. Instead, his demons killed her." Catherine wanted to ask more to understand the full story, but before she could form the words, footsteps thundered up the stairs and Sam burst into the room. He looked terrible. His hair stood on end as if he had been running his hands through it repeatedly. His clothes were the same ones he had worn the day before, rumpled and stained. His eyes, those blue-gray eyes that had first captured her attention at the train station, were red-rimmed and wild with fear barely contained. "Catherine." Her name came out like a prayer, like a plea for forgiveness. He moved toward the bed but stopped short as if afraid to come closer, as if his presence might somehow harm her. "I'm all right." Catherine tried to smile to reassure him. "We're both all right." Sam's knees seemed to give out. He sank into the chair on the opposite side of the bed from Eleanor, his head dropping into his hands. His shoulders shook with silent sobs, and Catherine realized he had thought he was going to lose her, just like he lost Mary. Eleanor watched this display with an expression Catherine couldn't read, something between contempt and grudging understanding. Finally she stood. "Dr. Harris says Catherine needs calm, no stress, no exertion, complete rest." Her eyes fixed on Sam with laser precision. "Can you give her that, Samuel, or will your presence cause more harm than good?" Sam lifted his head, meeting Eleanor's gaze. "I'll do whatever she needs." "Then prove it. Keep her calm. Keep her safe." Eleanor moved toward the door, then paused. "Because if anything happens to her or that baby, there won't be a hole deep enough for you to hide in." After Eleanor left, silence filled the room. Catherine looked at Sam, seeing the exhaustion and relief and fear warring on his face. "What Eleanor said before I went into labor." Catherine's voice was quiet but steady. "About 6 years ago, about someone you failed. She was talking about Mary, wasn't she?" Sam closed his eyes, nodding slowly. "And Eleanor," Catherine paused, the pieces clicking together, "the way she looks at you, the way she's been watching me. Eleanor is Mary's mother." It wasn't a question. Sam opened his eyes, meeting her gaze. "Yes, Eleanor Peterson was Mary Winters' mother, my dead wife's mother." The words came out hollow. "She's been testing me, through you, seeing if I could save you when I couldn't save her daughter." Catherine absorbed this feeling, the weight of it. "That's why she hired me. That's why she brought me to you at the train station. Why she suggested I help you." Sam's laugh was bitter. "I thought I was making my own choices, but Eleanor orchestrated everything, put us together to see if history would repeat. And if you failed again, then she'd have proof that I killed Mary through negligence, that it wasn't bad luck or fate, but me. Always me." Catherine reached for his hand. "But you didn't fail." "Not this time," Sam's voice cracked. "Not this time. I wanted to. Every time I saw you, every conversation we had, I wanted to tell you the truth. But I was afraid you'd run, and I couldn't bear to watch you go. Where would I run to, Sam? I have nowhere else." The words hung between them, truth and tragedy mixed together. Catherine had no choices left, no options beyond this room, this town, this man with his guilt and his ghosts. "Thomas is coming." Catherine remembered the telegram, the terror that had sparked the false labor. The telegram said he's arriving tomorrow, July 3rd. He says he wants to claim his rights as father. Sam's jaw tightened, his hands curling into fists. "He has no rights. He denied the baby. He called you a liar. He also has the law on his side." Catherine's hand moved protectively over her belly. "An unmarried woman has few protections. If he can prove paternity, if he can claim he wants to do right by the child, a judge might give him custody." "Over my dead body." The words were quiet but absolute. Catherine believed every syllable. Sam would die before he let Thomas take her baby. The certainty of it should have been comforting. Instead, it terrified her. Because men who were willing to die were also willing to kill, and violence only ever led to more violence. Promise me something. Catherine reached across the space between them, her hand seeking his. Promise me you won't do anything reckless, no matter what Thomas says or does. Sam's hand engulfed hers, warm and solid. I can't promise that. Sam, I can promise to try, to think before I act. But Catherine, if he threatens you or the baby, I won't stand by and do nothing. It would have to be enough. Catherine squeezed his hand, drawing strength from his presence, even as she worried about what that presence might cost them both. Dr. Benjamin Harris visited that afternoon. He was a man in his early 60s, with silver hair and kind eyes that had seen too much suffering to judge anyone for their circumstances. He examined Catherine with gentle efficiency, his hands practiced and sure. You're lucky, he said when he finished. Had another few hours of that stress, and you might have gone into real labor. At 7.5 months, the baby might survive, but the risks are considerable. What do I need to do? Rest completely, no work, no walking beyond what's necessary, no stress. His eyes moved to Sam, who stood near the window like a guard on watch. And you need to stay calm. I know that's easier said than done with troubles coming your way, but your baby's life depends on it. After Dr. Harris left, Eleanor returned with unexpected news. You'll stay here at the hotel, in this room. I'll have your things brought from the cabin. Before Catherine could protest, Eleanor held up a hand. This isn't charity. You work for me, and I need you healthy enough to work when that baby comes. Consider it an investment in my business. The words were gruff, practical, but Catherine heard something else underneath them, something that might have been carefully disguised as self-interest. What about the cabin? Catherine asked. Eleanor's expression flickered. That cabin can stay empty. It's been empty for 6 years. Another few weeks won't matter. But it did matter. Catherine could see it in the tightness around Eleanor's mouth, in the way her eyes avoided looking directly at Sam. That cabin was where Mary had died, where Eleanor's daughter and grandchild had bled out their lives, while the man who should have protected them was passed out drunk in a saloon. Some wounds never healed. They just scarred over, waiting for the right moment to tear open again. The train arrived at precisely 3 o'clock the following afternoon. Catherine watched from her window on the 3rd floor as Thomas Bradford stepped onto the platform, and her heart clenched with a mixture of fear and anger so intense she had to grip the windowsill to keep from shaking. He looked exactly as she remembered. Handsome in a refined way, his dark hair carefully styled, his suit expensive and well-tailored. He moved with the confidence of a man who had never been denied anything he truly wanted, who believed the world existed to serve his ambitions. Behind him stepped another man, older, carrying a leather satchel that marked him as a lawyer. This would be Silas Kern, no doubt. Thomas had come prepared for a legal battle. Sam appeared in Catherine's doorway within minutes, his face dark with barely suppressed rage. He's here. I know. I saw him arrive. I should go down there. Make it clear he's not welcome. No. Catherine's voice was firm despite the trembling in her hands. That's what he wants. He wants you to lose control, to threaten him, to give him ammunition to use in court. Sam's hand went to the gun at his hip, an unconscious gesture that revealed how close to violence he truly was. Then what do? We wait, let him make the first move, and we stay calm. The words were meant for both of them, a reminder that survival sometimes meant swallowing pride and enduring what felt unendurable. Thomas didn't make them wait long. An hour after his arrival, Eleanor appeared at Catherine's door, her face tight with disapproval. Mr. Bradford is downstairs. He's demanding to see you. Catherine struggled to sit up, her body still weak from the false labor. Tell him I'm not receiving visitors. I did. He says he'll wait. Says he has legal rights that supersede my authority as hotel owner. Eleanor's eyes flashed with anger. I'm inclined to have Doc throw him out bodily, but that might cause complications you don't need. Sam stood abruptly. I'll go down. Send him away. No. Catherine's voice stopped him. Let him come up. Better to face him now on my terms than to let him control the situation. Eleanor looked like she wanted to argue, but after a long moment she nodded. I'll bring him up. But Sam stays with you, and the door stays open. When Thomas walked into Catherine's room, his smile was everything she had once found charming. Now she saw it for what it was, a mask carefully constructed to hide the calculation underneath. "Catherine, my darling, you look well despite your condition." His eyes traveled over her, noting the bed rest, the pallor of her skin, cataloging weaknesses he could exploit. Then his gaze landed on Sam, and the smile cooled. "I don't believe we've been introduced. I'm Thomas Bradford, Catherine's fiancé." "Former fiancé," Catherine's voice was steel. "You lost that title when you called me a liar and denied your own child." A mistake born of shock and fear. Thomas moved closer, his expression shifting to one of practiced contrition. "I've regretted those words every day since. I've come to make things right. To marry you, to give our child a proper name and a proper home." Sam's voice cut through the room like a blade. "She doesn't need anything from you, especially not your name." Thomas turned to him, his eyes narrowing with barely concealed contempt. "And who are you, the ranch hand who's been taking advantage of a vulnerable woman?" Sam moved forward, but Catherine's voice stopped him cold. "Sam, don't!" The effort it took for Sam to control himself was visible. His whole body vibrated with the need to violence, but he stepped back, his hands clenching and unclenching at his sides. Thomas smiled, sensing victory. "I see you've made friends here, Catherine. How resourceful of you. But friendship won't stand up in court. I'm the child's natural father. I have legal standing, and I'm prepared to fight for my rights. You denied this baby." Catherine's voice shook with rage she could barely contain. "You destroyed my life, my reputation, my relationship with my family. Why would you want anything to do with us now?" For just a moment, something flickered across Thomas's face, something that might have been genuine emotion, though Catherine couldn't identify what kind. Then the mask slipped back into place. "Because I've had time to reflect on my actions, to realize that fear made me cruel. I want to be a father to our child Catherine. I want to build the life we planned before everything went wrong." Lies. Every word dripped with falsehood so obvious, Catherine marveled that he thought she might believe him. But then she remembered that Thomas had always been a skilled liar. He had convinced her he loved her after all, had played the part of devoted suitor so well she had given him everything, including her innocence and her trust. "I need you to leave." Catherine's voice was quiet but absolute. "This conversation is over." Thomas's expression hardened. "Very well, but know this. I've brought legal counsel. Silas Kern is one of the finest attorneys in Denver. We will be filing for custody of the child, and we will win." He turned to go, then paused at the door. "You have until tomorrow to reconsider. After that, we proceed through the courts. And Catherine, I promise you the courts will not be kind to an unwed mother who has taken up residence with a known drunk." The words hit their target. Sam flinched as if struck, and Catherine saw the old shame rise in his eyes. Thomas saw it too, and his smile widened with cruel satisfaction before he left. After Thomas's footsteps faded down the stairs, Sam sank into the chair beside Catherine's bed. He looked defeated, hollowed out, and Catherine's heart ached for him. "Is it true?" she asked softly. "Were you a drunk?" Sam's laugh was bitter self-loathing. "Yes. For 2 years after Mary died, I drowned myself in whiskey, tried to drink away the guilt, the nightmares, the sight of all that blood. But you stopped. Doc made me stop, found me trying to hang myself in my barn, cut me down, sobered me up, and told me I didn't get to take the easy way out. Said if I wanted to die, I had to live long enough to earn it by doing something worthwhile." Catherine reached for his hand. "You have done something worthwhile. You've helped me, protected me. That counts. Does it? Because right now my past is being used as a weapon against you, against our baby. Our baby." The words slipped out so naturally Sam didn't seem to notice. But Catherine noticed, and something warm bloomed in her chest despite the fear and uncertainty surrounding them. That evening, after Eleanor had brought dinner, and Catherine had picked at the food without appetite, there was a knock at the door. Doc Miller entered, his weathered face grave. "Need to talk to you both. About Thomas Bradford." Sam straightened. "What about him?" "Followed him after he left the hotel. Heard him talking to his lawyer at the saloon." Doc's eyes moved between them. "He's not here about the baby, or at least that's not his primary concern." "Then why is he here?" Doc pulled a folded paper from his pocket. "Managed to get a look at some documents the lawyer left on the table. Your father's will." "Catherine." Richard Morse died 2 weeks ago. Catherine felt the world tilt. Her father dead. She tried to summon grief and found only numbness. The man had disowned her, thrown her out like trash, chosen his reputation over his own daughter. What was she supposed to feel? The will is complicated, Doc continued. But the basics are this. Richard Morse left his estate, his business, everything to 2 heirs. His son, who inherits the business and primary holdings, and his daughter, who inherits a portion contingent on marriage and producing a legitimate heir within a year of his death. Son, Catherine stared at him. I'm an only child. Doc's expression was grim. According to the will, you have a half-brother, born 27 years ago to a woman named Anne Bradford. The name hit Catherine like a physical blow. Bradford, Thomas's surname. No, the word came out as a whisper. That's not possible. But even as she said it, she knew it was true. The pieces clicked into place with horrible clarity. Why Thomas had seemed so interested in her family. Why he had worked in her father's store despite being educated enough for better positions. Why he had courted her with such single-minded determination. Sam's voice was deadly quiet. Are you saying Thomas Bradford is Catherine's half-brother? That's exactly what I'm saying. Doc's face was set in hard lines. Richard Morse got his servant pregnant 27 years ago, paid her off, sent her away. The woman, Anne Bradford, kept the child. Raised him in poverty while Richard built his respectable life with Catherine's mother. Catherine felt bile rising in her throat. Thomas knew. When he courted me, when he proposed, he knew we were related. More than that. Doc unfolded another paper. I also heard him talking to Kern about his plan. He seduced you specifically for revenge. Wanted to hurt Richard by corrupting his legitimate daughter. Getting you pregnant was intentional. A way to force Richard to acknowledge him. The room spun. Catherine gripped the bedsheet, trying to anchor herself to something solid. Everything she had believed about Thomas, about their relationship, had been a lie built on lies. But then you told your father too soon, Doc continued. Before Thomas could leverage the pregnancy into an acknowledgement, your father threw you out instead, and Thomas lost his opportunity. Sam's voice shook with rage. So now he's here to marry her anyway, get the inheritance. That's my guess. The will says the daughter inherits if she's married and has a legitimate heir. If Thomas marries Catherine, he gets his inheritance as the son, plus her inheritance as her husband. He wins everything. And if I refuse, Catherine's voice was barely audible, then he'll claim the baby as illegitimate, prove paternity through the courts, and you'll get nothing. Either way, he controls the money. The question is whether you're part of the equation or not. Catherine felt sick. She had known Thomas was cruel, but this level of calculation, of cold-blooded manipulation, exceeded anything she had imagined. He had seduced his own half-sister, had deliberately gotten her pregnant, had destroyed her life as part of a revenge plot against a father who had rejected him. There's more. Doc's voice was reluctant, as if he didn't want to share what came next. I also heard Thomas talking to a man, Ned Holloway, a gun for hire out of Denver. The conversation was quiet, but I caught enough. Thomas said something about making sure Catherine doesn't live long enough to complicate things. Said childbirth is dangerous, especially with the right kind of help. The words took a moment to register. When they did, Catherine felt ice flood her veins. He's going to kill me. He's going to try. Sam was on his feet, pacing like a caged animal. But he won't get the chance. I'll kill him first. No. Catherine grabbed his arm, pulling him back. That's what he wants. If you attack him, you'll hang for it. And then I'll be alone and defenseless. Sam's eyes were wild. Then what do I do? Sit here and wait for him to murder you. You protect me. Stay close. Make sure he never gets me alone. Catherine's mind was working frantically, trying to find a solution that didn't end in blood. And we fight him legally. Find a way to prove his intentions, to expose him before he can act. Doc nodded slowly. Harold Peterson, Eleanor's son. He's a lawyer in Denver. Good one, too. I could send a telegram, ask him to come. Do it. Catherine's voice was stronger now, fueled by anger rather than fear. And in the meantime, we make sure Thomas doesn't have a chance to hurt anyone. After Doc left to send the telegram, Catherine and Sam sat in heavy silence. Finally, Catherine spoke the question that had been burning in her mind. You need to tell me the truth, Sam. All of it. About Mary, about what happened. If I'm going to trust you with my life, I need to know who you really are." Sam closed his eyes, his face aging 10 years in an instant. When he opened them, they held the kind of pain that came from wounds that never healed. "You're right. You deserve the truth." He took a deep breath, steadying himself. "Mary and I met after I came back from the war. I was 22, broken in ways that didn't show on the outside. Nightmares, drinking days when I couldn't remember who I was or what I'd done." His voice was flat, reciting facts as if they had happened to someone else. "Mary worked at her mother's hotel. She was kind, gentle, saw something in me worth saving. We started talking. She'd bring me coffee when I'd show up drunk, let me sleep it off in the hotel's back room. Eventually, talking turned to more. We married fast, too fast. I wasn't ready, wasn't healed, but Mary thought love could fix me. She was wrong." Sam's hands clenched into fists. "When she got pregnant, I panicked. The war had shown me what the world really was. Violence, death, meaninglessness. I couldn't imagine bringing a child into that darkness." Catherine listened without interrupting, letting the story unfold at its own pace. "I suggested adoption. Told Mary it would be easier, that we weren't ready to be parents. She refused. Said this baby was a gift, a new beginning. We fought. I got worse, drank heavier. Some nights I didn't come home at all." Sam's voice broke. "It was December, cold snow falling. Mary was 2 weeks from her due date. I was at the saloon drinking like I did every night. Someone came to get me, said Mary's labor had started. But I was too drunk to walk. Doc had to carry me home." Catherine saw tears streaming down Sam's face, now unchecked, unstoppable. "By the time I got to the cabin, she'd been in labor for 8 hours. Alone, terrified. The baby was breech. Dr. Harris tried everything, but it was too late. I was sober enough by then to hold her hand, to watch her die. The baby was a boy, born blue, never took a breath. I buried them together in the cemetery on the hill. 3 days later I tried to hang myself in the barn. Doc cut me down. Eleanor found us." Sam's voice dropped to a whisper. "She looked at me with more hate than I'd ever seen in a human face. And she said, 'You don't get to take the easy way out. You live with this.' So I have. Every day for 6 years I've lived with the knowledge that I killed them. Maybe not with my hands, but with my cowardice, my selfishness, my weakness." Catherine waited, sensing there was more. "But here's the part I've never told anyone." Sam's voice was ragged. "That night when Mary was dying, she whispered something to me. Her last words, she said, 'I forgive you. Promise me you'll forgive yourself.' I never have. I don't know how." The silence that followed was heavy with grief, with years of guilt and shame and self-loathing. Catherine sat with it, letting Sam's confession settle into her bones. Then she spoke, her voice gentle but firm. "Mary was right. You need to forgive yourself." How do I forgive myself for that?" "By doing better. By being better. By proving that her death taught you something." Catherine reached for Sam's hand. "But Sam, I'm not Mary. I'm not asking you to save me from anything. I'm asking you to stand with me, not instead of me, with me." Sam looked at her, really looked, and Catherine saw something shift in his eyes. Not the erasure of guilt that would take years if it ever came, but perhaps the beginning of understanding that punishment was not the same as penance. "I don't know if I can be what you need." "Then learn, starting now." Sam leaned forward, resting his forehead against their joined hands. "I don't deserve you." "Probably not, but here we are anyway." The moment was broken by footsteps on the stairs. Eleanor appeared in the doorway, her face tight with controlled fury. "Town council has called an emergency meeting tomorrow evening. Thomas Bradford has petitioned them to pass an ordinance banning unwed mothers from residing within town limits." Catherine felt her stomach drop. "Can they do that?" "Technically, yes. Towns have broad authority to set moral standards." Eleanor's eyes flashed. "But they're fools if they think I'll let it pass without a fight." The next evening the town hall was packed. Every seat filled, people standing along the walls, the air thick with tension and the smell of too many bodies in too small a space. Thomas sat in the front row, Silas Kern beside him, both looking confident. They had reason to be. The council consisted of 6 men businessmen and property owners, the kind who valued respectability above compassion. Catherine sat near the back, Sam on one side, Eleanor on the other. Her hands rested on her swollen belly, feeling the baby shift and kick, oblivious to the battle being waged over its future. The council chairman, a banker named Gideon Pritchard, husband to the woman who had condemned Catherine at the train station, called the meeting to order. "We're here to consider an ordinance regarding moral standards in our community. Mr. Bradford has brought to our attention certain concerns about the kind of people we're allowing to settle in Salado." Thomas stood, his expression grave and concerned. "Gentlemen, I come before you not to condemn anyone, but to protect the moral fabric of this community. Salado is growing, becoming a place where families settle, where children are raised. We must ask ourselves what kind of example we set by allowing women of questionable virtue to reside openly among us." Catherine felt Sam tense beside her, but she placed a hand on his arm, a reminder to stay calm. "I speak not from judgment, but from personal knowledge," Thomas continued, his voice dripping with false sincerity. "Miss Morse and I were engaged to be married in St. Louis, but she broke that engagement to pursue her own desires. Now she finds herself in a difficult situation, and while I have compassion for her plight, we cannot allow sympathy to override our responsibility to set moral standards." The lies were breathtaking in their audacity. Catherine started to stand to shout the truth, but Eleanor's hand on her shoulder held her in place. "Let him hang himself," Eleanor whispered. "Wait for the right moment." Testimonies followed. Mrs. Pritchard spoke about the importance of setting proper examples for young women. Harlan Wade, the miner who had harassed Catherine at the train station, spoke about maintaining community standards. Then Reverend Josiah Stone stood, his stern face brooking no argument. "Scripture is clear on this matter. Fornication is sin. The wages of sin is death. We cannot condone such behavior by allowing it to flourish in our midst." The words stung each one a lash against Catherine's already raw spirit. She felt shame rising hot and choking, threatening to drown her. But then Doc Miller stood, his weathered face set in hard lines. "I served with Sam Thorne at Gettysburg, saw him charge into Confederate lines to pull wounded men to safety, watched him take a bullet meant for a fellow soldier, never knew a braver man." His eyes swept the room. "If Sam Thorne vouches for Miss Morse, that's enough for me. The rest of you can go to hell." A murmur ran through the crowd. Then Irene Cooper stood. "She works hard, pays her way, bothers nobody. What more do we want from people?" Betsy Fletcher rose next, her young face pale but determined. "Miss Morse taught me to read. Nobody else cared enough to try. She's kinder than most folks in this room." But the tide was turning against them. Catherine could feel it. Fear of the unknown, fear of change, fear of being associated with shame, all of it was stronger than compassion. Then Eleanor Peterson stood, and the room fell silent. Eleanor Peterson commanded respect in Salado. She had built her hotel from nothing, had survived, as a woman alone in a rough mining town, had earned her place through sheer force of will and competence. When she spoke, people listened. 30 years ago, I came to this town carrying a child. No husband, no family, no prospects." The words fell like stones into still water. "Some of you were here then. You remember." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Catherine stared at Eleanor in shock. This was not part of the plan. "Mrs. Pritchard, you've had dinner in my hotel 100 times. Reverend Stone, I've donated to your church for 20 years. Did my shame poison you, or did you take my money and my labor and pretend not to notice?" Mrs. Pritchard's face went red. Reverend Stone looked at his hands. "My son Harold is one of the finest lawyers in Denver, a respected member of society, a good man who has done more charitable work than most of you combined. Should he have been cast out because his mother was unwed when she bore him?" Eleanor's voice rose powerful and uncompromising. "You want to pass an ordinance banning unwed mothers, then you ban me. You ban the foundation on which half this town was built. Because I'm not the only woman here who bore a child without a husband. I'm just the only one brave enough to admit it." The silence that followed was absolute. Catherine saw faces in the crowd, women whose eyes held recognition, whose expressions shifted from judgment to something that might have been solidarity. But then Thomas stood, his lawyer, whispering urgently in his ear. "With all due respect, Mrs. Peterson, your personal history, while touching, doesn't change the fact that we have a responsibility to set standards for the future. I move that we vote on the proposed ordinance." The vote was called. 6 council members, 3 voted against the ordinance, 3 voted for it. A tie. Chairman Pritchard looked uncomfortable. In the event of a tie, I cast the deciding vote. He paused, looking at his wife, at Eleanor, at the faces in the crowd. I vote in favor. The ordinance passes. Unwed mothers have 30 days to marry or leave Salado. The gavel fell. Catherine felt the world collapse around her. 30 days. Marry or leave. But marry who? Thomas, the man who had destroyed her life and now wanted to kill her. Or face exile alone and pregnant with nowhere to go. As the crowd filed out, Thomas approached, his smile victorious. You have a choice, Catherine. Marry me, legitimize the child, inherit your portion of the estate. Or refuse, and I claim the child as illegitimate, take my inheritance, and you're left with nothing. He leaned closer, his voice dropping so only she could hear. Make the right choice, for everyone's sake. The threat was clear. Marry him, or face consequences that went beyond legal battles. After Thomas left, Catherine sat in the emptying hall, feeling defeat settle into her bones. Sam knelt beside her chair, his face anguished. We'll fight this. We'll find another way. How the law is on his side. The town council is on his side. We have nothing. We have each other. The words were meant to comfort, but they felt hollow in the face of the forces arrayed against them. Catherine was so tired. Tired of fighting, tired of running, tired of being strong when all she wanted was to collapse and let someone else carry the weight. Eleanor appeared beside them, her face thoughtful. There might be a way. Harold should arrive tomorrow. He'll know better than I do, but I have an idea. What kind of idea? Eleanor's smile was sharp as broken glass. The kind that uses their own weapons against them. Thomas wants to play legal games. We'll play, but we'll play to win. That night, after Sam had reluctantly returned to his ranch at Catherine's insistence that he needed to care for his horses, she lay awake in her hotel room, staring at the ceiling. The baby kicked strong and insistent, a reminder of the life depending on her choices. Catherine placed her hands on her belly, feeling the movements, trying to draw strength from them. She thought about Mary, about the woman who had died in that cabin 6 years ago. Mary had loved Sam enough to forgive him, even as she died, had loved him enough to want him to forgive himself. Catherine didn't know if she had that kind of love in her, didn't know if she could forgive Sam if something went wrong, if history repeated itself in the worst possible way. But she knew she wasn't ready to give up. Not yet, not while there was still fight left in her. A soft knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Eleanor entered, carrying a tray with tea and small cakes. Thought you might be hungry. Catherine accepted the tea gratefully. Thank you for what you said tonight. About your son. Eleanor sat in the chair beside the bed. It was true, every word. She paused, her fingers tracing the rim of her own teacup. Harold's father was a ranch hand passing through, charming, handsome, full of promises. He left before I even knew I was carrying his child. How did you survive? Stubbornness mostly, refusal to let the world beat me down. Eleanor's eyes held distant memories. It wasn't easy, but I built something, created a life for my son. And when Mary came along, I thought I'd done everything right, taught her to be strong, independent, to not need anyone. Then she met Sam. Eleanor's voice hardened. And I watched my strong, independent daughter fall apart trying to save a man who didn't want to be saved. I watched her give everything to someone who took and gave nothing back. Catherine heard the anger, but underneath it, the grief. You blame yourself. Every day, Eleanor's admission was quiet. I should have stopped her, should have forbidden the marriage, taken her away, something, but I thought she was strong enough. I was wrong. They sat in silence for a moment. Then Catherine asked the question that had been burning in her mind since Eleanor's revelation at the council meeting. Why are you helping me? If I remind you of Mary, if seeing me with Sam brings back all that pain, why not send me away? Eleanor was quiet for so long, Catherine thought she might not answer. Then she spoke, her voice soft with something that might have been hope. Because maybe this is my chance to do it right, to protect the girl when she needs protecting, to make sure the man doesn't fail again. She met Catherine's eyes. Or maybe I'm just a foolish old woman who can't let go of her ghosts. You're not foolish. We'll see. Eleanor stood collecting the tea things. Get some rest. Tomorrow we start fighting back. After Eleanor left, Catherine lay in the darkness thinking about second chances, about whether people could really change or whether they just became better at hiding who they had always been. She thought about Sam, tortured by guilt, trying to atone for failures that had cost 2 lives. She thought about Eleanor carrying grief and blame for 30 years. She thought about herself alone and pregnant, trusting strangers because she had no other choice. And she thought about Thomas, driven by wounds inflicted in childhood, seeking revenge through destruction. None of them were innocent. None of them were purely good or purely evil. They were just people broken and failing and trying again, hoping that somehow love might be enough to tip the scales toward redemption. The baby kicked again, and Catherine smiled despite everything. This child, innocent and helpless, deserved better than the mess the adults had made. Deserved a chance to grow up loved and safe and free from the sins of their parents. Catherine would fight for that chance. With everything she had, she would fight. Sam appeared at her door the next morning before she had finished dressing. His eyes were wild, desperate, and Catherine's heart sank knowing what was coming. "Marry me." The words tumbled out without preamble, without romance. "Tonight. Now. Judge Reeves owes me a favor from the war. He'll do it quietly, no questions asked." "Sam? If you're married to me, Thomas can't claim you. The ordinance says unwed mothers have to leave. If you're wed, you can stay." "We can't just get married to solve a legal problem." "Why not?" Sam moved closer, taking her hands in his. "Catherine, I'm not asking you to marry me out of obligation. I'm asking because I can't imagine my life without you in it. Because every moment I'm not with you feels like drowning. Because I love you." The words should have made her heart soar. Instead, Catherine felt fear clawing at her throat. "You love me, or you love what I represent? A chance at redemption. A way to ease your guilt about Mary." Sam flinched, as if she had struck him. "That's not fair." "Isn't it? How do I know this is real and not just you trying to fix the past by controlling the present? You don't." Sam's honesty was brutal. "I can't prove my feelings are real any more than I can prove I won't fail you the way I failed Mary. All I can do is promise to try, to be present, to stay even when it's hard." Catherine wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that love could be enough, but trust was a luxury she could no longer afford. "What happens when the baby comes?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "What happens if there are complications, if history repeats itself? Then I'll be there, not drunk in a saloon, not running away. There, with you, whatever happens." "You can't promise that. You can't know." "You're right. I can't know." "But Catherine, neither can you. Neither can anyone. Marriage is always a leap of faith." Catherine looked at this man, this broken, wounded, desperate man who was offering her everything he had, which wasn't much. A small ranch, a dark past ghosts that might never rest. But also perhaps a chance at something real. "If I say yes," she said slowly, "it won't be to solve a legal problem. It won't be because I have no other choice. It will be because I choose you. And I need you to understand that if you fail me, if you run, when things get hard, I will never forgive you. I understand. And if something happens to me during childbirth, you don't get to blame yourself. You don't get to drink yourself to death or put a rope around your neck. You live, you raise this baby, you do better." Sam's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "I promise." "Then yes, I'll marry you." The kiss that followed was different from their first. Not desperate or afraid, but grounded, real, a promise made flesh. They married that evening in Eleanor's private parlor. Judge Marcus Reeves officiated, a grim-faced man who had seen too much war to be shocked by anything civilians did. Doc Miller served as witness, along with Eleanor, who stood in the corner with an expression Catherine couldn't read. Catherine wore a simple dress borrowed from Betsy. Sam wore his only suit brushed clean but showing its age. They held hands and spoke vows that felt both ancient and newborn. "I take you, Catherine, to be my lawfully wedded wife, to love, honor, and cherish in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, as long as we both shall live." Sam's voice was steady, his eyes never leaving hers. "I take you, Samuel, to be my lawfully wedded husband, to love, honor, and cherish in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, as long as we both shall live." Catherine's voice didn't waver. This was her choice, her decision. Whatever came next, she was choosing it with eyes wide open. By the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride. The kiss was gentle, reverent, a promise of all the years to come if they could survive the immediate future. After the ceremony, Eleanor hosted a small reception. Irene brought food. Doc poured whiskey for the men, tea for Catherine. They toasted the future and tried not to think about the battles still to come. As the evening wore on, Catherine began to feel strange. Not pain exactly, but pressure. A sense of something building, something inevitable approaching. She was standing by the window looking out at the darkening mountains when the first real contraction hit. It was different from the false labor, sharper, more insistent, radiating from her back around to her belly. Catherine gasped, her hand flying to the windowsill for support. Sam was at her side instantly. "What is it?" "I don't know. Maybe nothing." But even as she said it, another contraction came stronger than the first. Dr. Harris, who had been invited to the reception, moved to her side, his practiced hands gentle as he examined her. "How far apart are the contractions?" "Maybe 5 minutes," Catherine tried to breathe through the pain. "But it's too early, 3 weeks too early." "Babies come when they're ready, not when we want them to." Dr. Harris looked at Sam. "We need to get her somewhere she can lie down. This baby is coming tonight." The world tilted. Catherine felt Sam's arms around her, supporting her weight. Felt Eleanor's hands on her shoulders, guiding her toward the stairs. Heard voices urgent and worried, discussing what to do, where to go, how to manage a birth that was happening too soon. But underneath it all, she felt fear. Cold, visceral fear that history was about to repeat itself, that she would die like Mary died, that this baby would die like Mary's baby died, that all of Sam's promises and all of her courage would mean nothing in the face of biology and bad luck. Another contraction, harder than before. Catherine cried out, unable to hold back the sound. They got her to her room, to the bed. Dr. Harris sent for his medical bag. Eleanor began boiling water, gathering towels. Doc stood guard at the door, his hand on his gun, watching for threats that might come from outside. And Sam held Catherine's hand, his face pale with terror, his eyes haunted by memories of another woman, another birth, another night when everything went wrong. "Stay with me," Catherine whispered, gripping his hand hard enough to hurt. "Whatever happens, stay with me. I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." The contractions came faster now, harder, stealing her breath and her strength. Catherine felt her body taking over, moving through ancient rhythms, preparing to bring new life into the world, whether she was ready or not. Dr. Harris examined her, his face grave. "She's progressing fast. Too fast. This baby wants out." "Is that bad?" Sam's voice was tight with barely controlled panic. "Not necessarily, but with 3 weeks to go, there could be complications. We need to be prepared." Thunder rolled in the distance, and Catherine realized a storm was building. Lightning flashed through the window, illuminating the room in harsh white light, the storm outside matching the storm inside her body. Between contractions, Catherine heard raised voices downstairs. Thomas Bradford demanding to see her, citing his rights as the baby's father. Doc's voice, hard and uncompromising, telling him to leave. Then Eleanor's voice, cold as winter ice. "If you don't leave my hotel right now, I will have you thrown out bodily. And the law be damned." The voices faded. But Catherine knew Thomas hadn't given up. He was out there waiting. And she was trapped here, vulnerable, fighting a battle that left her no strength for anything else. Another contraction worse than all the others. Catherine screamed, unable to hold it back, Sam's face above her, his eyes bright with tears. "You're doing so well. You're so strong. I can't do this." "You can. You are." Dr. Harris's voice, urgent. "Catherine, I need you to push. On the next contraction, push as hard as you can." The pain built, cresting like a wave. Catherine pushed, bearing down with everything she had. And somewhere in the distance, thunder crashed and lightning split the sky, and the storm raged on, matching the violence of birth with the violence of nature. "Again," Dr. Harris commanded. "Push again." Catherine pushed and pushed and pushed until she thought she might break apart from the effort. Then Dr. Harris's voice, sharp with concern. "The cord. The cord is around the baby's neck." Catherine heard Sam's sharp intake of breath, felt his hand tighten around hers. "Can you fix it?" Sam's voice was breaking. "I'm trying. Catherine, don't push on the next contraction. I need time to work." The command was impossible. Her body wanted to push, needed to push. Fighting the instinct took every ounce of willpower she possessed. She felt Dr. Harris working his hands, gentle but urgent. "Me, you take care of our baby. You hear me? Me, you take care of our baby. You hear me? You don't give up, you don't run. You take care of our child. Nothing's going to happen to you. You're going to be fine. Promise me. I promise. But you're going to be here to make sure I keep that promise. You're both going to be fine." Dr. Harris's voice triumphant. "Got it. Cord is clear. Catherine, on the next contraction, push with everything you have." The contraction built. Catherine pushed, putting every last bit of strength into it. The head is crowning. One more push, one more, and you'll meet your baby. Catherine pushed, and the world exploded into white-hot pain and relief and the sudden absence of the weight she had been carrying for 9 months. Then silence. Terrible, endless silence. The baby wasn't crying. Catherine tried to sit up to see, but Sam held her down gently. "Give him time." Dr. Harris was working over the infant, his hands moving quickly, clearing the airway, rubbing the tiny back, trying to coax breath into lungs that hadn't yet learned to work. The seconds stretched into eternity. Then finally, gloriously, a thin wail split the air. The baby was crying. The baby was alive. "A boy," Dr. Harris announced, his voice thick with emotion. "You have a son." He placed the tiny, squalling infant on Catherine's chest. She looked down at the red, wrinkled face, the shock of dark hair, the perfect tiny fingers grasping at air. "Hello," she whispered. "Hello, little one. I'm your mother." Sam's face, above her tears streaming down his cheeks, his expression transformed by wonder and relief and joy, so profound it seemed to fill the entire room. "He's beautiful. He's perfect." Catherine looked up at her husband, this man who had been broken by loss and was now being remade by love. "We did it. We're alive. All of us." Sam leaned down, pressing his forehead to hers, his hand gently touching their son's downy head. "Thank you. Thank you for giving me this, for giving us this." The baby's cries quieted as he found Catherine's breast latching on with the instinct born into every living thing. The room settled into something like peace, the storm outside beginning to fade, the worst of the danger past. But even as Catherine held her son and felt the warmth of Sam's presence beside her, she knew this was only the beginning. Thomas was still out there, still plotting, still dangerous. Eleanor stood in the doorway, her face wet with tears. She made no attempt to hide. She looked at the baby, at Catherine and Sam, and something in her expression broke and healed at the same time. "Mary would have been happy for you," she said softly. "Both of you." It was the first time Eleanor had spoken Mary's name without anger, the first crack in the armor of grief and blame she had worn for 6 years. Sam looked at her, his eyes asking a question he couldn't voice. Eleanor nodded once. "She would have wanted you to be happy, and so do I." The words were a gift, forgiveness offered tentatively, carefully, not complete, but beginning. But before anyone could respond, Doc appeared in the doorway, his face grim. "We have a problem. Thomas Bradford is downstairs. He's brought the sheriff. Says he has legal grounds to demand custody of the child. Says he has witnesses who will testify the marriage was fraudulent, entered into only to circumvent the law." The peace shattered. Catherine clutched her baby closer, terror flooding through her exhausted body. "He can't take my baby. I won't let him." Sam stood, his hand going to his gun. "Neither will I." Eleanor moved to block the door. "No one is taking that child anywhere. Not tonight. Not ever." From downstairs came the sound of heavy boots on wooden floors, men's voices raised in argument. The sheriff trying to maintain order, Thomas insistent and angry, demanding his rights. Catherine looked down at her son, this tiny, perfect being who had fought his way into the world against all odds. She had promised him safety, had promised him love, had promised him a life free from the sins of his parents. Now she would have to fight to keep those promises, and the battle was just beginning. The sound of boots on stairs grew louder. Catherine clutched her newborn son tighter to her chest, feeling his tiny heart beating against hers. His warmth, the only solid thing in a world that had suddenly turned threatening again. The baby's eyes were closed, his small mouth working in instinctive suckling motions, even in sleep. He had no idea that men were coming to take him away. Sam moved to stand between Catherine and the door, his hand resting on the colt at his hip. His face had gone hard, all the softness of new fatherhood burned away by the prospect of violence. This was the Sam who had survived Gettysburg, who had killed men and watched friends die, who knew exactly how much blood a human body could spill before it stopped moving. Eleanor positioned herself beside him, her smaller frame no less formidable. "No one gets past this door without going through both of us." Dr. Harris gathered his medical instruments with shaking hands. He was a healer, not a fighter, but his face showed determination. "The child was born premature. Any attempt to move him could be fatal. I'll testify to that in any court." The footsteps stopped outside the door. A moment of silence heavy with threat. Then a knock sharp and official. "Mrs. Thorne, this is Sheriff Clayton. I need to speak with you." Catherine recognized the name. Tom Clayton had a reputation as a fair man, harder to bribe than some, though not immune to pressure from powerful interests. She exchanged glances with Sam, seeing her own uncertainty reflected in his eyes. "Come in," she called, her voice stronger than she felt. "But only the sheriff, no one else." The door opened. Sheriff Clayton entered alone, though Catherine could see Thomas lurking in the hallway behind him, his face twisted with barely controlled fury. The sheriff was a man in his early 40s, weathered and tired-looking, carrying the weight of impossible choices. His eyes went immediately to the baby in Catherine's arms. Something flickered across his face too quick to identify. Pain, perhaps, or memory. "Ma'am, I'm sorry to intrude at such a time, but Mr. Bradford has filed a legal complaint. He claims the child is his by blood, that your marriage to Mr. Thorne was entered into fraudulently to circumvent the town ordinance, and that he has rights as the natural father." "He denied this, baby." Catherine's voice was ice. "He called me a liar. He destroyed my life. What rights could he possibly have? The law doesn't care much about what was said in private, ma'am. Only what can be proven in court." Sheriff Clayton shifted uncomfortably. "He's brought a lawyer, says he can prove paternity, prove the marriage was fraudulent, prove he's been trying to do right by you since he learned of your condition. All lies." "Maybe so, but lies backed by legal documents are hard to fight without legal documents of your own." Sam's voice was deadly quiet. "So what are you here to do? Sheriff, take the baby, arrest us." Sheriff Clayton met his gaze steadily. "I'm here to inform you that a hearing has been scheduled for tomorrow afternoon. Judge will hear arguments from both sides. Until then, the child stays with his mother." He paused. "That's the law, and I uphold the law even when I don't much like what it says." Thomas pushed past the sheriff into the room, his lawyer Silas Kern following close behind. "That's unacceptable. The child could disappear by tomorrow. They could run. Then you'd best hope they don't." Sheriff Clayton turned to face Thomas, and Catherine saw something in the lawman's expression that gave her hope, dislike perhaps, or distrust. "Because if they run, that's a different crime, and I'd have justification to pursue. But until then, the baby stays with his mother. That's my call to make, not yours." Thomas's face flushed red. "Your call. I'm paying you to enforce the law, not make it." The admission hung in the air, damning in its clarity. Sheriff Clayton's jaw tightened. "You're not paying me anything, Bradford. And if you were trying to, that'd be bribery, which is a crime I take real personal." Silas Kern put a restraining hand on Thomas's arm, his lawyer's instincts recognizing the mistake. "What my client means is that we expect the law to be enforced fairly and promptly." "It will be, at tomorrow's hearing." Sheriff Clayton moved toward the door. "Until then, everyone leaves this room. Mother and child need rest." Thomas looked like he wanted to argue, but Silas Kern pulled him toward the hallway. "We'll see you in court, Catherine, and we will win." After they left, Sheriff Clayton paused in the doorway. He looked at Catherine, then at the baby, and his expression softened in a way that made him seem years younger. "My sister was in your situation once. Pregnant, unmarried, father denied the child. Town where she lived passed an ordinance just like ours. She had to leave. Died on the road, her and the baby both. Winter cold got them." He met Sam's eyes. I won't let that happen again if I can help it, but I can't fight the law. Best I can do is make sure you get a fair hearing. What you do with that chance is up to you." After the sheriff left, Doc returned, his face grim. "Harold Peterson sent word. He'll be here by morning, but that doesn't give him much time to prepare." "We don't need much preparation." Eleanor's voice was cold fire. "We have the truth on our side." "Truth doesn't always win in court." Doc looked at Sam. "We need more than truth. We need evidence, proof of Thomas's real intentions." Catherine felt the baby stirring against her chest, his small mouth seeking food. She began to nurse him, marveling at how natural the action felt despite never having done it before. Instinct was a powerful thing. "What if we could prove he planned to harm me?" She looked up at the faces surrounding her. "Doc, you said you overheard Thomas talking to a hired gun about making sure I didn't survive childbirth." "I heard it, but hearing isn't proof. Not the kind that stands up in court." Sam's voice was thoughtful. "What if we could get him to admit it? Get him to confess where someone could witness it? How the man's not stupid. He's not going to confess to murder conspiracy just because we ask nicely." "No." Sam's face was grim. "But he might confess if he thought he'd already won. If he thought Catherine was dying." The suggestion hung in the air. Catherine understood immediately what Sam was proposing, and ice formed in her chest. "You want to fake my death." "Not death. Just convince him you're dying, that the birth went badly, that you're fading." Sam moved closer, kneeling beside the bed. "If he thinks you're about to die, he might let his guard down, might say something incriminating where the right people could hear it." Eleanor was already shaking her head. "Too dangerous. What if something goes wrong? What if he decides to finish the job himself? Then I'll be there to stop him." Sam's hand went to his gun. "I won't let him near her." Dr. Harris spoke up, his voice hesitant. "It could work. Birth complications are common enough. Hemorrhaging, infection fever. I could claim Catherine is failing, that death is likely within hours. Thomas would believe it coming from me." Catherine looked down at her son, this tiny, perfect being who deserved better than the mess the adults around him had created. She thought about the life she wanted for him. Not one where he was raised by a monster like Thomas, not one where he grew up knowing his mother had been too afraid to fight. "Do it." Her voice was firm. "Tell Thomas I'm dying, and let's see what he reveals when he thinks he's won." The plan was set in motion within the hour. Harris went downstairs, his face grave, and spoke to Thomas in a voice loud enough to carry through the hotel lobby. "I've done what I can, but Miss Morse, Mrs. Thorne, she's failing. The birth was too traumatic. She's hemorrhaging internally. I give her until morning at best." Catherine, listening from her room above, heard Thomas's response. The false sympathy, the carefully constructed grief. How terrible. The poor woman. And the child. The baby seems healthy enough. Premature but strong. He'll need a wet nurse, someone to care for him if the mother dies. Of course, I'll make arrangements. As the father, it's my responsibility. The words were smooth, practiced, but underneath them, Catherine thought she heard something else. Satisfaction. Relief. The problem solving itself. After Dr. Harris returned upstairs, they waited. Sam sat beside Catherine's bed, his hand wrapped around hers, his gun within easy reach on the nightstand. Eleanor sat in the corner watching the door with hawk-like intensity. Doc positioned himself in the hallway, pretending to doze, but actually standing guard. Hours passed. The baby woke, nursed, slept again. Catherine dozed fitfully, her body exhausted from childbirth, but her mind too alert to truly rest. Every sound made her jump. Every footstep in the hallway could be Thomas coming to finish what he had started. It was near midnight when they heard it. Quiet voices outside her door. Thomas and another man, their words barely audible. "You're sure she's dying?" "Harris said morning at latest. Could be sooner. And once she's gone, the child is mine." "Legally, yes. You're listed as the father. The marriage to Thorne was clearly fraudulent, entered into to avoid the ordinance. No judge will uphold it." A pause. Then Thomas's voice colder, now stripped of pretense. "I want to see her. To say goodbye." Catherine's hand tightened on Sam's. This was it. The moment when everything could go wrong. The door opened. Thomas entered, Silas Kern behind him. But behind the lawyer came two other figures, Sheriff Clayton and Doc Miller, both looking grim. Mr. Bradford wanted to pay his respects. Sheriff Clayton said, his voice neutral. I told him I'd need to accompany him, to make sure there's no impropriety. Thomas's smile was magnanimous. Of course, Sheriff. I understand completely. He moved to Catherine's bedside. She had prepared for this, letting her face go slack, her breathing shallow. She kept her eyes half closed as if consciousness was slipping away. Thomas leaned close, his voice dropping to a whisper, meant only for her ears. You should have married me when you had the chance, Catherine. Would have been easier for everyone, but this works too. You die a tragic death. I raise our son with proper resources, and no one ever knows what really happened. Catherine's eyes opened fully, meeting his. Except I'm not dying. Thomas jerked back as if struck. His face went through a rapid series of expressions. Confusion, realization, fury. You lied. The doctor lied. About her dying, yes. Sheriff Clayton stepped forward, his hand on his gun. But we didn't lie about what we heard. Mr. Bradford, you just confessed to conspiracy in front of witnesses. That's a crime. I confessed nothing. I said she should have married me. That's not a crime. You said no one would ever know what really happened. Doc Miller moved into the light, implying there was something to hide. And I've already testified that I heard you discussing hiring Ned Holloway to ensure Catherine didn't survive childbirth. Thomas's lawyer went pale. I knew nothing about this. Didn't you? Sheriff Clayton pulled out a piece of paper. This is a bank draft made out to Ned Holloway for $500, signed by you, Mr. Kern, on behalf of your client Thomas Bradford. Payment for services rendered. Silas Kern stared at the document, his professional composure cracking. That was for legal research. I was told it was for legal research. Legal research that involved making sure a woman died in childbirth? Sheriff Clayton's voice was hard. That's murder for hire, counselor, and you're an accessory. The room erupted into chaos. Thomas lunged for the door, but Sam was faster, blocking his path. They collided, Thomas's fists swinging wildly, Sam taking the blows and returning them with precision, born of military training. Stop! Sheriff Clayton's voice cut through the violence. Bradford, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder. Maybe more charges once we dig into your background. Thomas stopped, struggling, his chest heaving. You can't prove anything. It's their word against mine. Actually, we can. A new voice from the doorway. A man in his 30s, well-dressed, carrying a leather case. I'm Harold Peterson, Mrs. Thorne's legal counsel, and I have quite a bit to prove. Harold moved into the room with the confidence of someone who held all the winning cards. He opened his case and pulled out a sheaf of documents. Let's start with the bigamy charge. Thomas Bradford, also known as Thomas Mitchell, you contracted a marriage to one Sarah Mitchell in Kansas City 5 years ago. That marriage was never dissolved. Harold held up a document. When you came to St. Louis 2 years later, you changed your name to your mother's maiden name, Bradford, presented yourself as unmarried. Your employer, Richard Morse, conducted a background check on Thomas Bradford. He found nothing because your legal name was still Thomas Mitchell. Thomas's face went white. That's a lie. It's a matter of public record. I have the marriage certificate from Kansas City, the name change filing from 18 months ago, and testimony from Sarah Mitchell herself, who was quite surprised to learn her husband was in Colorado trying to marry his half-sister. Gasps rippled through the room. Catherine felt sick. Harold continued relentlessly. You deliberately concealed your marriage to deceive both your employer and his daughter. That's fraud on top of bigamy. Harold held up the document. I also have testimony from Mrs. Mitchell herself, who was quite surprised to learn her husband was in Colorado trying to marry another woman. Silas Kern was backing toward the door. I resigned from this case effective immediately. You're not going anywhere, counselor. Sheriff Clayton grabbed his arm. You're under arrest too. Accessory to attempted murder, conspiracy to commit fraud, possibly more. Sheriff Clayton turned toward the hallway. Bring him in. 2 deputies led in a rough-looking man in his 40s, hands bound. Ned Holloway had the weathered face of someone who had lived hard and made harder choices. His eyes darted around the room before settling on Thomas with something like contempt. Mr. Holloway has agreed to testify in exchange for reduced charges, the sheriff announced. Tell them what Mr. Bradford hired you to do. Ned's voice was gravelly from tobacco and whiskey. Bradford paid me $500 to ensure the woman didn't survive childbirth. Said to make it look like natural complications. Said women die all the time having babies. No one would question it. Catherine felt Sam tense beside her, his hand going instinctively toward his gun. She gripped his arm tighter. "I didn't do it," Ned continued, his eyes finding Catherine. "Got to the hotel that night, saw half the town standing guard. Doc Miller and others armed and watching. Knew I'd never get close, so I left. But I kept the money and the note Bradford sent with it. Figured it might be useful someday." He pulled a crumpled paper from his pocket and handed it to the sheriff. "That's his handwriting. Instructions on how to do it. What to say if anyone asked questions." Sheriff Clayton read the note, his face darkening. "This is conspiracy to commit murder in writing. Bradford, you just signed your own prison sentence." Thomas lunged forward, but Sam was faster, blocking his path. They stood face to face, Thomas's rage meeting Sam's cold control. "You would have killed her." Sam's voice was barely above a whisper. "Killed her and stolen her child. For money." "For what was owed to me," Thomas spat back. "For everything he took from me. He's dead. Your father's dead. And killing Catherine wouldn't have brought him back or made him love you." The truth of it seemed to hit Thomas like a physical blow. His shoulders sagged, the fight draining out of him. Also the matter of Richard Morse's will. The document Thomas used to justify his claim on Catherine's inheritance. "I've had it examined by experts in Denver. The codicil naming Thomas as son and heir was added after Richard's death. Forgery, in other words? You can't prove that. The ink is different. The handwriting doesn't match. The paper stock wasn't manufactured until 2 months after Richard died." Harold smiled coldly. "We can prove it quite easily, and forgery of a will is a serious crime." Catherine watched Thomas's face as the walls closed in around him. She saw the moment he understood that he had lost, that all his careful planning, all his manipulation, had come to nothing. But instead of defeat, she saw rage building. The kind of rage that came from a lifetime of rejection and resentment, now boiling over with nowhere to go. This is all his fault. Thomas's eyes fixed on Sam with hatred so pure it was almost physical. "Richard Morse's fault. He threw away my mother like trash, left us to starve while he lived in luxury with his legitimate family. I'm his son, his blood, and he treated me like nothing." For the first time, Catherine heard real emotion in Thomas's voice. Not the calculated charm or the cold manipulation, but genuine pain. "I just wanted him to see me, to acknowledge that I existed, that I mattered." Thomas's voice broke. "Is that so terrible, to want your father to love you?" The room fell silent. Even knowing what Thomas had done, the evil he had attempted, Catherine felt a flicker of something that might have been pity. He was a monster, yes. But monsters were made, not born. "It's not terrible," she said quietly. "But destroying innocent people won't make your father love you. He's dead. He'll never see you. And hurting me, hurting my child, won't change that." Thomas looked at her, and for a moment she saw the boy he must have been. The child watching other children play, knowing he could never join them. The young man working in his father's store, surrounded by wealth that would never be his. The son who was never acknowledged, never loved, never enough. Then the moment passed and the mask came back. "Take me away, Sheriff. I'm done here." As Sheriff Clayton led Thomas and Silas Kern from the room, Catherine felt the tension drain from her body. It was over. The immediate threat was gone, but the cost of victory was written on Sam's face. He stood by the window staring out at the darkness, his shoulders tight, with an emotion Catherine couldn't name. Eleanor approached him, her hand tentative on his arm. "You did well. You protected her." "This time," Sam's voice was hollow. "What about next time? What about all the times I won't be there? There is no next time. Thomas is going to prison. Catherine and the baby are safe. Until the next Thomas, the next threat, the next disaster I can't prevent." Eleanor's hand tightened on his arm. "Samuel, look at me." He turned and Catherine saw tears on his face. "You're not responsible for every bad thing that might happen. You can't protect everyone from everything. You can only do your best in each moment." Eleanor's voice was gentler than Catherine had ever heard it. "And tonight, your best was enough." Sam shook his head. "I failed Mary. I'll always have failed Mary." "Yes," Eleanor's agreement surprised them both. "You failed her, and I failed her, and Dr. Harris failed her. We all failed her in different ways. She moved to stand directly in front of Sam, forcing him to meet her eyes. But here's what I've learned in 6 years of hating you. Hate doesn't bring her back. Blame doesn't undo the past. And punishing you doesn't make me miss her any less. Eleanor's voice cracked. Mary had melancholia. Did you know that it runs in our family? Her grandmother had it died by her own hand after childbirth. Dr. Harris warned Mary not to get pregnant, told her the risk was too high. She did it anyway because she wanted a baby more than she wanted safety. Sam stared at her. What are you saying? I'm saying I blamed you because it was easier than admitting I knew. I knew she was at risk. I knew pregnancy could trigger the melancholia, and I said nothing because I wanted her to be happy. Tears streamed down Eleanor's face now. I failed her too, maybe more than you did because I knew and I stayed silent. Dr. Harris stepped forward, his own face wet. And I failed her by not refusing to attend the birth. I should have insisted she not attempt pregnancy. Should have been firmer in my warnings. He looked at Sam with eyes full of shared grief. I've carried that guilt every day since. Wondered if I could have saved them, if I'd been stronger, more insistent, more skilled. And I've watched you carry the same guilt, destroying yourself with it. We can't bring Mary back. Eleanor's voice was steady now despite the tears. But we can honor her memory by doing better, by being better, by letting go of the hate and the blame and choosing to love the people still here. She looked at Catherine and the baby. Mary would want you to be happy, Samuel. She told you to forgive yourself. Maybe it's time we all took that advice. Sam broke then, the walls he had built around his grief finally crumbling. He sank to his knees, his whole body shaking with sobs. Eleanor knelt beside him, pulling him into her arms, and they wept together, for Mary, for the baby who never drew breath, for 6 years of blame and guilt and grief that had poisoned them both. Catherine watched from the bed her newborn son sleeping peacefully in her arms and felt hope kindle in her chest. This was what healing looked like, messy and painful and hard-won, but real. After a long time, Sam lifted his head. He looked at Eleanor with eyes that held something new, not the absence of guilt, but perhaps the beginning of forgiveness. Thank you, his voice was hoarse from crying, for telling me, for forgiving me. I'm not sure I've forgiven you yet. Eleanor's honesty was gentle, but I'm choosing to try, and that's a start. The hearing the next day was almost anticlimactic. With Thomas in jail and Silas Kern disbarred and facing criminal charges, there was no one to argue against Catherine's right to keep her child. Judge Cartwright reviewed the evidence Harold presented. The bigamy charge, the forged will, the testimony about the murder conspiracy. He listened to Doc's account of overhearing Thomas's plans. He heard Sheriff Clayton describe the confession, and he ruled in Catherine's favor on every count. The marriage to Sam was declared valid. The town ordinance was repealed after Eleanor and several other women testified about being unwed mothers themselves. Judge Cartwright turned to the matter of the estate. Richard Morse's will, once we remove the fraudulent codicil, leaves his estate to his legitimate heirs. As Thomas Bradford's claim was based on forgery, he inherits nothing. The estate, valued at approximately $48,000, will be distributed as follows. He adjusted his spectacles. The business and remaining properties will be sold. 70% of the proceeds, roughly $33,000, will go to charitable organizations supporting orphans and unwed mothers as specified in the valid portion of Mr. Morse's will. The remaining 30%, approximately $15,000, goes to Catherine Morse Thorne as Richard Morse's sole legitimate heir. Catherine felt the weight of the sum, more money than she had ever imagined, money her father had valued more than his own daughter. That evening, as they discussed what to do with the inheritance, Catherine's answer came easily. Half goes to expanding the school, she told Sam and Eleanor. Real classrooms, books, supplies, so children don't have to learn sitting on cabin floors, and we'll set aside funds for scholarships so poor children can get educations. And the other half, Eleanor asked. A trust for James and the new baby, and a fund to help women like Betsy, women who have nowhere to turn when they're pregnant and alone. Lodging, medical care, help finding work. Everything my father should have given me, but didn't. Sam's hand found hers. Your father would have been proud. No, Catherine's voice was firm. He wouldn't have been. He'd be horrified that his money is going to help fallen women, but I don't need his approval anymore. I have something better. I have purpose." As they left the courthouse, the townspeople who had gathered didn't jeer or whisper. Instead, they nodded respectfully. Some even smiled. Catherine realized that in standing up to Thomas, in refusing to be cowed or controlled, she had earned something precious. Not approval exactly, but respect. As they left the courthouse, the townspeople who had gathered didn't jeer or whisper. Instead, they nodded respectfully. Some even smiled. Catherine realized that in standing up to Thomas, in refusing to be cowed or controlled, she had earned something precious. Not approval exactly, but respect. Betsy Fletcher waited on the courthouse steps, her young face anxious. At 17, her pregnancy was just beginning to show beneath her apron. She stepped forward as Catherine approached, her hands twisting nervously. "Mrs. Thorne, I need to tell you something." Betsy's voice trembled. "I'm with child. The father left town when I told him. My parents, they wanted to send me away to hide the shame." Catherine took the girl's hands in hers. "What did you do?" "I told them no." Betsy's chin lifted with newfound courage. "I watched you stand up in that courtroom, watched you fight for your baby against everyone, and I thought, if Mrs. Thorne can be that brave, maybe I can too. Your parents agreed. They're angry, but they didn't throw me out. And Mrs. Peterson offered me a room at the hotel, said I can work until the baby comes, and after if I choose." Betsy's eyes shone with tears. "Because of you, Mrs. Thorne. You showed all of us that we don't have to be ashamed, that our babies deserve to be loved, not hidden away like sins." Catherine pulled the girl into an embrace. "You're going to be a wonderful mother, Betsy, and you're not alone. None of us are alone anymore." Over Betsy's shoulder, Catherine saw other women watching. Young women, older women who carried their own secrets and shame. And in their eyes, she saw the beginning of something new. Not acceptance, perhaps not yet, but possibility. That afternoon, Catherine and Sam walked to the cemetery on the hill. James slept in Catherine's arms, wrapped in the blanket Eleanor had made. Sam led her to a simple grave marker, Mary Winters Thorne, 1858 to 1876, and Baby Boy Thorne, born and died December 15, 1876. Catherine stood silently, holding their living son, honoring the dead. "I'm sorry I couldn't save you," Sam whispered to the stone, "but I promise I'll do better by them, by all of them." Catherine placed wildflowers on the grave. "Thank you for loving him, for teaching him what he needed to learn. We'll make sure your death meant something." They stood together in silence, the only sound the wind through the grass and James's soft breathing. 3 generations, the dead, the living, the future. Finally, Sam turned away. "I'm ready now, to let her rest." Catherine took his hand. "Then let's go home." That evening, back at the hotel, they gathered for a quiet celebration. Irene brought food. Doc poured whiskey for the men's, cider for the women. Harold regaled them with stories of legal battles in Denver. Even Eleanor smiled, her stern face softening as she held the baby and let him grip her finger with his tiny hand. "What will you name him?" she asked Catherine. Catherine looked at Sam, seeing the question in his eyes. They had discussed this before, but now, after everything that had happened, the name felt even more right. "James," her voice was clear, "James Thorne, after my grandfather." Sam's smile was warm. "A good, strong name." Eleanor looked down at the baby, her expression unreadable. Then she whispered something too quiet for anyone else to hear. Catherine thought it might have been Mary's name. A blessing from the grandmother the child would never know. The days that followed fell into a gentle rhythm. Catherine recovered her strength slowly, her body healing from the trauma of childbirth. Sam divided his time between the ranch and the hotel, bringing fresh milk and vegetables, helping with repairs, being present in ways he hadn't known how to be 6 years ago. And Eleanor transformed. The hard edges of grief softened into something that might someday be peace. She taught Catherine how to soothe a colicky baby, how to tell the difference between hungry cries and tired cries. She sat with Sam on the porch and told him stories about Mary's childhood, good memories, untainted by the tragedy of her death. 3 weeks after the birth, Catherine was strong enough to leave the hotel. Sam drove her and the baby out to the ranch, and Catherine saw her new home for the first time as a resident rather than a guest. The foreman's cabin had been transformed. Sam had spent every spare moment making it ready. new curtains on the windows, a rocking chair by the fireplace. A cradle he had built himself, sturdy and simple, placed where Catherine could reach it from the bed. "It's perfect." Catherine turned in a slow circle, taking it all in. "It's home." Sam's smile was tentative, as if he was afraid to believe in happiness. "I hoped you'd think so." That night they lay together in the narrow bed, the baby sleeping in his cradle nearby. Catherine's head rested on Sam's chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "Are you happy?" she asked quietly. Sam was silent for a long moment. "I'm learning to be. Learning that maybe I deserve to be." "You do deserve it. You've earned it." "Have I? Or did I just get lucky?" Catherine lifted her head to look at him. "Luck is what happens when you keep trying, even when everything tells you to give up. You didn't give up, Sam, even when it would have been easier. Even when you thought you didn't deserve another chance. That's not luck. That's courage." Sam's hand came up to cup her face, his thumb brushing away a tear she hadn't realized she was crying. "I love you, Catherine Thorne, more than I thought I could ever love anything again. I love you too, and I choose you. Every day I choose you." The kiss that followed was gentle, reverent, a promise of all the nights to come. Outside, the wind whispered through the pine trees. In his cradle baby, James made small, sleeping sounds. And for the first time in 6 years, the cabin held life instead of ghosts. The seasons changed. Summer faded into autumn, painting the aspen trees gold against the evergreen backdrop of the mountains. Catherine established her informal school, teaching miners' children to read and write in the cabin's main room while James napped nearby. The seasons changed. Summer faded into autumn, painting the aspen trees gold against the evergreen backdrop of the mountains. In late September, a letter arrived from Denver. Sheriff Clayton had forwarded it, thinking Catherine might want to know. Thomas Bradford had been tried and convicted on 7 counts: conspiracy to commit murder, attempted murder for hire fraud, forgery, bigamy, and 2 lesser charges. The judge, citing the premeditated nature of the crimes and the vulnerability of the intended victim, sentenced him to 25 years hard labor in the territorial prison. Sam read the letter aloud as Catherine nursed baby James. When he finished, she sat quietly for a long moment. "Do you feel satisfied?" he asked, watching her face. "No." Catherine looked down at their son, his tiny hand wrapped around her finger. "Just Dad. He could have had this. Love, family, peace. Our father's rejection poisoned him, made him think revenge was the same as justice. He made his choices. I know. But I still grieve for the boy he must have been, the child who just wanted his father to see him." She looked up at Sam. "That's the difference between us. Thomas let his wounds make him cruel. We're choosing to let ours make us kind." Sam pulled her close, careful of the baby between them. "That's why you're stronger than any of us. You have every reason to be bitter, and instead you choose compassion." Catherine thought about Thomas in his prison cell, about all the years stretching ahead of him with nothing but regret for company. She hoped he would find some measure of peace, some way to forgive himself and the father who had failed him. But that was his journey to make. Hers led in a different direction. Catherine established her informal school, teaching miners' children to read and write in the cabin's main room, while James napped nearby. Sam's ranch prospered. Word spread about his skill with horses, and orders came from as far as Denver. He hired help, 2 young men eager to learn the trade, and the property expanded to accommodate the growing business. Eleanor visited often, bringing gifts for the baby and staying for dinner. She and Catherine grew close in a way that surprised them both. Not quite mother and daughter, but something deeper. 2 women who had survived terrible things and chosen to keep living. Betsy Fletcher gave birth to a daughter in December, with Catherine and Dr. Harris attending. The town baptized both babies on the same Sunday, James Thorne and little Margaret Fletcher, and no one whispered behind their hands. Betsy worked at the hotel, her daughter sleeping in a cradle Eleanor kept behind the reception desk. The girl thrived, as did her mother, both proof that shame didn't have to define a life. And slowly, painfully, Eleanor and Sam rebuilt their relationship. It would never be what it was before Mary's death. Too much had happened. Too much pain had been inflicted on both sides. But it was real, honest, built on truth rather than the lies of omission they had both told themselves for years. Spring came early in 1883. Catherine stood on the porch of the cabin watching Sam work with a young mare in the corral. Her hand rested on her swollen belly, 6 months pregnant with their second child. James, now 8 months old, sat at her feet playing with wooden blocks Sam had carved. The baby kicked strong and insistent. Catherine smiled, placing her hand over the spot. This pregnancy was different. No fear, no desperation, no running from one disaster into another, just quiet anticipation and joy. Sam finished with the mare and walked toward the cabin, his face breaking into a smile when he saw her. He climbed the porch steps and pulled her into his arms, careful of her belly. "How are my 2 favorite people?" His hand joined hers on her stomach. 3 favorite people, Catherine corrected, gesturing to James. "Right, 3 favorite people." They stood together watching the sun sink toward the mountains, painting the valley in shades of gold and amber. James babbled happily, stacking blocks and knocking them down. The horses nickered in the corral. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called its voice, carrying on the evening breeze. "Do you still have nightmares?" Catherine asked quietly. Sam considered the question. "Sometimes, but less often now. And when I wake up, you're there. That makes all the difference." "What do you dream about when you don't have nightmares?" "This." Sam's arms tightened around her. "Everything we have. Everything we built. I dream about James learning to ride. About teaching our daughter or son to gentle horses. About growing old with you and watching our grandchildren play in this valley. Those are good dreams. The best I've ever had." As twilight deepened into night, they moved inside. Buck followed them in his grizzled muzzle gray with age, but his eyes still bright. He settled by the fireplace with a contented sigh, claiming his usual spot. Sam built up the fire while Catherine put James to bed. They sat together in the rocking chair, moving in gentle rhythm, talking about nothing and everything. Plans for the new baby. Ideas for expanding the school. Whether they should plant an apple orchard in the south field. Ordinary conversations about an ordinary life. The kind of life neither of them had thought they would ever have. Later, as Catherine drifted toward sleep, Sam's voice came softly through the darkness. "I used to think redemption meant erasing the past, making it like the bad things never happened." He paused. "But that's not it, is it? Redemption is learning to live with what you've done, learning to do better, choosing love over fear, hope over despair, every single day." Catherine reached for his hand in the darkness. "Mary would be proud of you." "I hope so." His voice was thick with emotion. "I hope she knows that her death wasn't meaningless, that it taught me how to value life, how to be present, how to love." They lay in silence, holding each other as the fire burned low and the baby slept peacefully in his cradle. Outside, stars wheeled across the vast Colorado sky. Inside, warmth and safety and love. Not perfect love, not love without scars or shadows or moments of doubt, but real love, earned love. Love that had been tested by fire and chosen anyway. Catherine's last thought before sleep claimed her was of the future stretching out ahead of them. Years of tending the ranch and raising children and growing old together. Years of laughter and tears, triumph and struggle, all the messy, beautiful reality of a life fully lived. She had come to Salado expecting nothing, hoping for nothing beyond survival, and she had found everything. As spring bloomed across the valley and new life stirred within her, Catherine Thorne closed her eyes and dreamed of morning. The stranger at the train station had kept his promise. He had given her beauty when the world saw only shame, had offered protection when everyone else offered only judgment, had shown her that even the most broken people could heal if they were brave enough to try, and together they had built something worth keeping, something worth fighting for, something worth believing in. A family, a home, a future bright with possibility. Outside, the first birds began their morning songs. Buck's tail thumped softly against the floor as he heard the birds a gentle rhythm that spoke of contentment. Inside, baby James stirred in his sleep, making the small sounds that meant he would wake soon, hungry and demanding attention with all the fierce urgency of new life. Sam was already awake, Catherine realized. She felt him watching her in the gray light of dawn, his expression soft with wonder, as if he still couldn't quite believe she was real. "Morning," she whispered. "Morning." He leaned down to kiss her forehead. "I'll get James. You rest." Catherine watched him lift their son from the cradle, marveling at the gentleness in his large scarred hands, the tenderness in his voice as he murmured nonsense to the baby. This was Sam's redemption. Not grand gestures or dramatic sacrifices, but this, showing up every day, being present, choosing love. And it was enough, more than enough. It was everything. Outside, the sun broke over the mountains, painting the valley in gold. A new day, a new beginning. The stranger's promise kept. The end.